I just finished my Italian class, and I have two teachers, one in Rome and one in Bergamo, which is in the north of Italy. And the last time I had class with the one in Bergamo, which is the one I had today, and I invited Euge. And class was really fun because my Italian teacher speaks a little bit or she speaks pretty well Spanish, but she hadn't practiced like for 4 years. And Euge doesn't speak Italian. So I just said, I just came up with the idea so they could meet and they could see how we can connect from Denver, Buenos Aires, and Italy, just like that, boom. And then we talked a little bit about the stuff that we like to talk about, about relationships and about dreams and fears and challenges. And I was talking in Italian, even though I'm a disaster, okay, but it's so hard. Like you learn so much. There are some universal concepts, values. It doesn't matter what language you talk to. It's still like about friendship, about love, about forgiveness, acceptance. It doesn't matter what words you use. It's the concept is the same, And when I'm trying to talk about those things in Italian, the teacher gets it right away. Sometimes I don't have the words because I don't know the word in Italian, but the other teacher or the teacher, she knows it in Italian and she understands what I'm trying to say because it's universal. It's something that humanity needs. It doesn't matter if you're talking Chinese or Russian or Japanese, Italian.
Love that.
So that's so amazing, when you go through that. And Euge, who doesn't speak Italian, but sometimes you just get the message through the energy and vibrations and stuff, right? And you're having a connection.
I love that. I mean, I just love that because just last night, Faith asked me, my daughter, of course, she said, "What, Mommy, why do we talk?" And it stopped me for a second because I was like, I guess because we can't communicate certain things, but then I started thinking on a deeper level, and I'm like, why do we talk? Because often it just gets in the way. Like, why were we born with this communication? Is very interesting because what you're speaking of is universal. So has language helped us or made it worse? You know what I mean?
Well, and then yesterday, to follow up on what you're saying, first I realized in every language, sometimes I go around. Like I was doing it in Italian too.
Like I can beat around the bush in 15 languages. That's funny.
Yeah. And I was telling her, like, she asked me a question and I started to go around and around.
That's funny.
And yeah, it is hilarious. So the personality is the same in whatever language, you still have the same personality. So I'm saying, no, I need to say it directly in Italian. And now you just asked me something and I'm going to go around.
Why do you think we talk?
Well, so I'm not going to answer directly. Yesterday, this came up with a young actor in Argentina, one of our first interviews in Spanish. His name's Lucas, and he's gay. Sometimes you kind of feel weird saying those things, but he says he's gay. He's also a Boy Scout, and mother just passed away, so he's dealing with a lot of hurt and grieving. But he was writing that grief because he's a writer too. And then he said that when we can articulate what we feel, that has a very powerful healing process. So when you ask me if language and speaking is important, I know in some cases it makes things worse because we can't even explain what we're feeling, and so we mess it up sometimes. And of course, because we talk too much or we say the wrong thing. But
well, I'm just wondering if yeah, it would be very primitive. I mean, it's like, I guess the cave people came up with the first, I don't even know, like, did they come up that they were grunting at each other and then suddenly, I mean, how did we come up with all these words and languages? It's quite amazing. But when it comes down to like actual just connection, do we need it? Or like, that's all just explanation of stuff. It's like, oh, I miss, but it's really not the present moment, because it's like, oh, I need to explain where I'm coming from. But if we're just right here, why do we have to explain a thing?
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a different way of approaching life. But if you look at all the major religions, they're all about stories.
Mhm.
The Bible, the First Testament, the Old Testament, the New Testament, uh, the Quran, the Buddhism, about Buddha and how wasn't unhappy being rich and he left. And so they're sharing stories,
Mhm.
and we connect with these stories. And then they make up stuff, right? Like that's where we mess up things, when we start making up stuff without any proof. And then one person's version of fantasy is a reason to kill the other person's version of their fantasy, because my fantasy is the truth and your fantasy, so I'm going to go kill you, right? That's when it gets.
But but everything is fantasy if it's not in the moment. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Because like even your recollection, say like if we talked about a class that we were all in or something, your recollection of it and my recollection is different because that moment is past. So your experience and my experience, even though it could have been the same exact class, is now fantasy because we're telling a story about it. You know what I mean? So it's like, where is the line between imagination and truth? Like, I don't know. Because I
Well,
could, well, that was a fact for me, and you can go, no, it isn't, or vice versa. You know what I mean? That's where we get in trouble. That's where religions and everybody fight, because it's
yeah,
going to be a
that's so
fantasy at that
interesting.
point.
Why do we fight about stuff like that? Like even the Constitution, right? It says all men are created equal. The people that say all men created equal had slaves. So already there's a disconnect with the what you're not seeing as all men created equal, right? And then they're not seeing women as equals because they didn't even allow them to vote. They couldn't vote, they couldn't study, they couldn't. Um, so we're trying to correct those things. It's like it takes us forever to have, women voted like just 100 years ago, and then they could drive, and then they could go to university and stuff. Why does it take us so long to do the right thing? Like
Yeah.
decades and centuries to make it just, to make it just. Now, if we live the present, like you say, if we just live the moment
Mhm.
and maybe just see each other as equals, forget about the color of the skin, the gender, sexual orientation, all that. Just live the moment, connect, right? Don't judge. That would be amazing if we
I
could do
guess you
that.
would be more like animals then, because I think the thing that separates us from animals is that we think about thinking. And animals just very instinctual. And animals not like, well, that's my friend who's attacking me. They're like, I'm after, we're in a fight now. You know what I mean? Like an animal is just because there's no, I mean, maybe there's a language there, but like they don't speak the way that we speak. And so
Yeah.
it's all just in the moment. We don't know, I guess, because maybe they do bring along story, but we don't really know, because some people say that animals have no memory. And some people say that they do, because like an elephant, if you tie it to the thing, it's going to remember I was tied. So they have to have some memory. It's very weird.
Yeah, same with, I think most animals, with dogs, if they had a traumatic experience, they carry that trauma, whether it's
True.
about night or darkness or noises. I don't know. So this thing about language, it's so amazing when you try when you speak in different languages. And so I was going to, in my text that I sent you, it said can't, but I meant can, that we could later include one of these Italian teachers or both in type of conversations, because then it's like a new interview, but with somebody who's in Europe, you know?
It's interesting. Yeah, and it's also interesting how some words don't translate through all the languages. Because I'll hear that a lot, like when, like even when we were in our meeting and I forgot who said what, but they'd be like, how do you say, like, how does that word translate in
Oh,
English?
yeah.
Because the meanings change. Like, why is that? Like, that's an
Yeah.
interesting thing.
Some languages don't even have a certain words that are very Western, very, and I can't remember, but there's some countries, they don't have like the word debt because they don't even know what that, they don't get in debt.
Right. Interesting. I just read a thing, and I'm Irish, but I don't know really that much about the Irish culture because it's kind of deep in my family. It's not like I'm straight from Ireland, but I read this meme that said in Irish, there's no, in that language, you don't ever say I'm sick or I'm broke, but you say sick is on me or broke is on me. So you're never like adopted as a part of who you are. It's just an experience that you're having. And I thought that's interesting because in English, we're always like, I'm this, I'm that. And it is kind of like declaring like, you're that forever, or you're just feeling that right now, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good example. The other thing is that we go back to humor, where we used to think that certain jokes are just jokes. Like when we used to make fun of gay people, we used to make fun of Black people, we used to make fun of women, and you think, oh, it's harmless, you know, but you're making jokes at the expense of putting another group of people down. So there's where the words can have, I mean, words can be very hurtful and painful, right?
Right. Well, I remember working with this guy who worked really hard to get his citizenship. And he, he's from Mexico and he worked at the restaurant. And I mean, he worked his butt off and he got it, but he worked hard, and then he like brought his family over from Mexico and he was working as like a busser in like fine dining restaurants. He had 2 jobs. He worked all the time and would just like put his money away. And so when he was studying to become an American citizen and stuff, he would get mad at me because he's like, you take for granted this stuff. Like, because he would ask me questions and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And he's like, see, you don't know the answers. Like you would probably fail this test. And he had a point, but then also certain things that he learned were not how we use it. So one time we were joking around. I was totally joking. He was like a brother to me. Like we would play all the time. And I was like, I called him silly. I was like, oh, don't be silly. He was mad at me for like weeks. He gave me the silent treatment. I didn't understand. I find his name was Manuel, but we called him Manny. I was like, Manny, what is wrong? Why won't you talk to me? And he finally admitted it's because I called him silly. And that made him so mad. It was like I called him stupid. And that's what he took it as.
Yeah, he didn't understand that silly is used in a friendly,
like a playful thing. He thought I really put him down. Like I thought he was an idiot. And and he said he was so sensitive because it was right when he's studying to be a citizen. I'm telling him he's stupid. And it couldn't have been farther from, but that was his translation. That's what he learned silly to mean, like you're stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, no. So like sometimes we use words and they can be really offensive and we don't even know. It depends on the meaning that person attached. I mean, I suppose you can say that about anything because I know some girls like joke around like you bitch and blah, blah. I don't joke like that with my girlfriends, but some girls do, whereas other girls would be like, don't call me a bitch. Like that's rude. And other people think it's funny. So I guess it all is what meaning you attach to it. And
and also the intention, like we say all the time, the intention.
The intention. We talked about that with like the N-word. Like I have a friend, to this day on Facebook who uses it like in every post that he makes. And then I have other people who will be like, don't ever use that on my Facebook page, I'll block you, you know? So it's
Yeah.
like, and they're both people of color. So it's like, are we ever going to get on the same page with like, this word has this meaning and it's not okay? Or, I mean, I don't think that's ever okay. I would never use it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. We learned in the United States that word, you just can't use it. Maybe African Americans can. I mean, they do, and they seem to be okay.
Well, I will admit I'm not offended when a Black person uses it.
Yeah.
But I would be offended like if a white person, I don't know, and maybe that's
Yeah.
I don't know, that's wrong too, you know what I mean? Because it should be a universal, like, no, that's just not okay.
Yeah. I was going to ask you. I'm always impressed by how you always have high energy and always try to be very positive in your demeanor, in your message. How do you do that?
I drink a lot of coffee. I
No,
do,
it's not the
I do
coffee.
drink a lot of coffee. I do. But you know what's interesting is that like, I think especially I've always had some of this from yoga, meditation and things like that. But the more that like you and I are working together and these concepts are not only just ideas, but becoming more embedded in me, I like wake up excited every day. I haven't felt this way since I was like a little kid. I told Faith, I said, I feel like it's Christmas every day.
Yeah,
I love
you're
it.
doing something creative. You're following a plan. You're
Yeah,
doing something new. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you have that professional side with classes, like that is being professional. Like you don't bring your personal problems or whatever when you're a teacher or a director or whatever, that's how I would define somebody as being professional. And that's what I do when I'm leading my business and stuff. I I even check myself, like if I'm down, you don't want to be down because then you bring the whole organization down. They really, when you're a leader, you have to be aware of that. So that's already an accomplishment as being very professional. But then I also see it even now we're colleagues, we're co-hosts and stuff, and the way you start. I mean, I just wanted to share that because it is something that is inspiring. It's inspiring. I started the morning a little bit frustrated with certain things. Just I was refinancing. I had to refinance 2 loans, and one fell through because the lender was worried about the war and rates going up and stuff, and so we signed everything. I was approved for everything, and then it fell through. And that say, wow, how they even sent a notary to my house so we could sign all the documents. And it's the first time this ever happened, right? But once you think you're going to accomplish that, you go through all the loops, all the documents, blah blah blah. So that put me down a little bit, and then some stuff with the writer in London where things are changing and it's not going the way I hoped and stuff. So that was a little bit, and just some other little things. And then when I had my class with the Italian, she was down, but because of her studies and stuff. But we started to connect, and we both lifted ourselves, and we were laughing, and we just forgot about. It's about living the moment. That
yeah,
it was such the moment thing. Like forget about all the stuff that didn't work out. Forget about the future that you don't know what's going to happen. We were just enjoying learning new lessons, sharing stories, and
mhm,
it was uplifting, right? So I finished that, and then I'm already in a different mood when I'm moving to this meeting. But I also reflected on your energy, on you know, just, oh yeah, the last class you were so passionate, and I go, wow, it's so hard to sometimes when you're dealing with people's issues
Mhm.
and they have to act, but they're bringing in all this kind of baggage, and I include myself, you know, like, but yeah, keep everybody motivated and stuff. I mean, it's interesting. It has
Well, thank
its
you. I
challenges.
appreciate it. I mean, I do appreciate that actually very much because it is a conscious effort. I mean, I think I love teaching and I actually love what I do. And so it does put me in a different mindset. I mean, if people knew one day I'll write a book because if people knew some of the situations I was just walking out of when I would walk into class or something like
Yeah,
even on Zoom, but like in person, it was like crazy. I was like, people think I'm nuts because it would be like full tears, like, all right, let's go, let's do this. And it's not phony. It's just I would be able to rechannel my energy. And that's why
yeah,
I want to teach that because it's like, it's not that it would be like so easy all the time or that I was always coming out of like, I wish I could say it's because every day for 4 hours before I go into every session, it's meditation or whatever. That's ideal. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes the car breaks down or you get a bad call or the loan falls through and class is starting or this happens or
oh
that
yeah,
calls and yells at you or whatever. And then class starts, you know what I
yeah,
mean? So I really had to be like, I gotta switch gears totally, like
yeah,
an acting job, as if everything's okay, not pretending and like fake. Because I remember one time my ex-boyfriend said, he was like, God, he's like, how can you just switch like that? It kind of scared him because we were in a big fight.
yeah,
We were in a big fight and he was in the studio and we were like, just, I don't even remember what it was about, but it was heated. And it was like right when we were breaking up and he saw some of my students. He was still there when my students showed up. And I was like, hey, welcome, and I just switched gears. And later, and he just looked at me like, what? She's nuts, because, and then later when I went home, he's like, how can you? And I was like, what, did you expect me to just like take it out on my students? That's like
yeah,
none of their business. It's a totally different thing, so
yeah.
I learned how to do
But
that.
I I think it's a wonderful skill. Like I wouldn't say it's nuts in the sense that, well, I mean, I can see like if it's the boyfriend or somebody that I don't know, maybe wants you to be upset because they think that's a way of you caring about them, and then they see, wait, how can you switch like that, right? But in the end, it's actually a very good skill. It's something that we should all learn, not to take out something that happens with another person to take it out on another person. That has nothing
Right,
to do
because
with
then
it.
I just know that then we have a bad class and then we have, and it's not being inauthentic, because I think
No.
that there's also a time and place to share stuff. And for me, like that's why I haven't even shared a lot of my story yet because it wasn't processed. And I'm like, I'm not sharing it to dump on people. Like I'm sharing it to inspire or empower. And if it's not that, I don't really want to share it because it
Yeah.
also leaves it on me like just okay, we're all doomed. Do you know what I mean? If I'm like still in the process of it too much.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because there is a time where if you share, if you, it's also like a skill to share, but in an inspiring way, and then figure out when am I, if I'm sharing the problem and, oh, this is happening to me, blah, blah, and we start having that victim mentality,
Yeah.
and people just want to share how victim they are, or how
Yeah.
just to feel, when instead you might share a story where you got hit, or something happened to you, but it's inspiring when you can share, being authentic. I guess being authentic is huge. Like this story of this guy I just met yesterday, and he's sharing a deep grief, but not as a victim, just and he's dealing with it, and he's and he didn't even want to talk about it, but you know, the way I approach stuff, not always, but sometimes I go there, you know, I go there, but in a very subtle, and I want to be respectful and considerate, but I also want that connection.
Mhm.
So I didn't even know that his mother died, but then we started talking about that. And then I share my story about my father's death. And my father was one of the people that loved me the most, you know, and I felt that pure love, and how it affected my relationship when he dies, how it affected my relationship with my sisters, with my my wife and my mother. It threw me off, you know, and then I did some stupid stuff, but I also helped my mother. She was doing some stupid stuff. So I think, like, for example, she had a business and she was losing money in this travel agency. And I said this in Spanish, now I'm saying it in English. So, and we, as me and my two sisters said, oh, you know, this is good for her because she's busy in the agency. She's not getting depressed because my father died. So it was good for her, you know, to focus on something. She was excited about it. But then after a few months, we found out she was losing money every month. And she was asking us for money separately without us knowing, like my older sister, my younger sister, me. And finally, somehow it came up. What, you're giving? She's asking you money. I thought she was only asking me money, and so she was asking money to lend her to support a business that was losing money, and that freaked me out. So and again, it was right after my father died, and so we were very sensitive about that. But I just said, and 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 she adores her brother who passed away, but like she had she had this relationship with her brother, like they adored each other, you know. And the brother, who was an older brother, and I can talk about him because he has such a rich life of friendship and family. He wasn't that very rich in money, but every time I go to his house, he would have friends over and friends and family and friends, and you know what the hell, like, so just they all loved him, and my mother loved him. But when I see that my mother is losing money, she was going to lose her apartment. She was going to lose a lot of stuff that she had, because you can't keep putting money in the business. You know, it wasn't going anywhere. So I called, and I couldn't sleep. So it was 4 in the morning. I called my uncle, her brother, at 4 in the morning, and he was awake, like, because he worked in the shipyards and stuff. I called him, you know, Pepe, mommy, you know, mommy's business is losing money, you know. And I was so surprised. He didn't want to talk to his sister about it. He goes, well, you know, it's her decision. I go, but she's going to lose everything, you know. So he didn't have the heart to confront her. So I ended up confronting my mother, and she got really mad at me. I said, you can't keep going like this. It's ridiculous. You asked money, blah, blah, blah. And she thought she kept it secret, you know, but now it came up, and I had to be the one to bring it up, you know. Nobody wanted to tell her. So anyway, she gets really upset. She hasn't talked to me for like 10 days or 2 weeks, which never happened ever. You know, she gave me the silent streaming. And but after a month or so, she started tango lessons. She started doing other stuff, and she said, "Thank you. You know, you're right. It didn't make sense to keep having a business that was just sucking up your savings and starting to borrow money to keep this business." And then the relationship got just like before or better.
Well, I think it also depends though on, like, that situation directly affected you because it's your mom and it's your family, and those things need to be talked about, right? Like, I think that's the other thing that I've learned, at least in my life, is like who I share stuff with and when. right? Like, so, it would be a disservice. It's like a surgeon. If a surgeon is like doing a bunch of surgeries and it's a hard day, you might talk to other surgeons about that. Or like if somebody died on the table,
Oh,
you might talk to other doctors about that, because they're going to be able to relate and hold the container for that person. But if you walked in and you're the patient, he's like, oh God, a guy just died on my table in there. That
yeah.
was terrible. You know, that's the wrong person to share it with, because now that's going to put you in total fear because you have zero container to hold that information. You're like, oh my God, am I going to die? Like, you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think all depending upon, like, it's not that you never talk about the hard stuff. It's that, who are you sharing that with? Does it pertain to them? Are they going to be able to help you with this solution? And if it doesn't pertain to them and they can't help with the solution, I don't want to share it, because what I've learned is I used to do that with friends and people thinking they were just my friend. So why wouldn't I share it? But they weren't the person that could contain it. And so it just brought us all down. And I would like get off the phone and think, now I feel worse after sharing, you know?
Wow.
So then I just was like,
Well,
wait a minute, I think I'm just sharing with the wrong people at the wrong time, or like the wrong information.
yeah, that is so interesting. So I mentioned this story because that's the story I gave yesterday to this young man, 28-year-old, who is
Yeah.
grieving, and he's going through this dynamic with his siblings and his father, where there's, because of the pain, there's stuff happening there. You know, they don't know how to deal with that pain, how to communicate. And so that's why I shared the story that he's not alone. When my father died, it does affect the family dynamic, and somebody has to keep it together. I mean, hopefully everybody, but sometimes everybody's like, they can't deal with that pain. So I felt that he realized that, yeah, this is, don't ignore the pain. Don't try to hide it. Don't drink more, do drugs. Like, go where the pain is, express it in writing or therapy or with friends that care, but don't pretend that it's not there, or ignore it. That would
Yeah,
be the
it
message.
could kill you. I mean, that could have really hurt your mom. So it was a good thing that you had that conversation. I mean, that, yeah, exactly. It's not, by not sharing with everyone doesn't mean that you're denying it. It just means you're very specific with it. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that's a tough thing to learn, you know, because I notice, like, I don't know, I just notice sometimes with people who keep saying the same thing over and over and over, you're like, you're just going to keep creating that. And it's not to say you can't share it with somebody, but when you keep saying it, like, oh, it's awful, it's broke, it's whatever, right? Like, you guys didn't stay in the problem with your mom. You guys you addressed the problem, and then you went to the solution. It'd be different if everyone was just like, okay, let's talk for hours about how mom is losing all her money, and that's it. You know what I mean? Then that's gossip, I think, because there's no solution out of it. Gossip offers no solution. It's just like a
Well,
complaint.
yeah, and some people, like my older sister, she said, oh, that's what makes her happy. Let her. I go, no, I mean, that's not it. Maybe she's happy now, but she's going to be in a much worse situation, and she's going to lose the agency anyway, and then she's going to have less of her savings, or maybe lose her apartment. So you don't. Well, anyway, that's how
So
I
how,
reasoned it. But it goes back to also the crucial conversations that we're going to present, because it starts with it has like 7 strategies or techniques, starting with speak from the heart. But when you say speak from the heart, it means, what is the goal? What is the goal that you want? In my case, the goal was for my mother to live a happy life, but not go broke, and support her. And there was conflict. Maybe I could have learned a little bit better to do it. But that's, you just also said, it's hard to deal with these stuff that are so emotionally charged.
but you also just pinpointed something too. It's like I think a lot of times people will wallow in the problem of it. And I've done this too. It's like you'll wallow in the problem of it because they want to avoid the discomfort of that uncomfortable conversation where it's like, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable for just a minute, but then we're going to get beyond that and we're going to get to something great. So I think sometimes because of a discomfort that you know that you're going to have to face for just a minute, like this is going to be awkward maybe with my mom, or she's going to be unhappy that we all talked about this or whatever for a minute. But in the long run, it's going to make her a much happier life. So I think
Yeah.
that's what people avoid. You know, it's like, I just don't want to be uncomfortable even for a minute. So they'll be uncomfortable their whole life instead.
Yeah, they avoid conflict.
Avoid it.
And that's another thing. One of the reasons why we are uncomfortable is because we don't know exactly how to approach it. The more techniques we learn, and again, I would like to bring up Alon again, but talk in more in depth about these strategies. I mean, I talked to him yesterday, and he has. I'll forward it to you. It's still like a rough draft, but we can approach it with different types of examples of conflict and how to approach it. Like if you are, there are also things that remind me of the Meisner technique. Like be aware of the other person, what they're feeling, you know, be conscious of what they're feeling so you can understand them better. And also if things are heating up, you can diffuse it because then you're also aware of their feelings, plus you're aware of your feelings. And instead of just boom, letting your emotions just take over. And that's very hard to do. But again, if you practice these techniques, plus what you do with yoga and meditation and Meisner, I mean, that's, when I ask you, like, I wonder, like, sometimes you come up with all these wisdom, I would call it, right? I go, why does she know so much? Why does she always have the right thing to say and stuff? And I don't think you even realize that the way you communicate with other students, and they're so diverse. And some of them, you see their emotions, because this is probably one of the most emotional type of work you can do. Like in school, they're almost taught not to be emotional. They're almost taught, hey, just study, be quiet, you know, just get the answers, get the exact answer. They don't teach them how to express themselves, how to deal with conflict. Imagine if they started using these techniques on how to deal with your emotions and how to deal with another person's emotions. Imagine if we started teaching that.
Amazing.
You know,
Like an abundance mentality. Like, I'm like, why is it that in all of high school and college, there aren't courses unless you go directly into business? They don't even teach you how to balance your checkbook or like,
yeah.
I mean, no one has checkbooks anymore, but you know what I mean? Like to keep your books. That should be all the way through high school, I feel like. Like, wouldn't that set us up better? Like emotional intelligence, the basics of bookkeeping and finances. Like, this is
Oh
going to
yeah.
set up for success.
Yeah, there are like 22 states now that passed law on, or that for in school to teach them finance, you know,
Oh,
just,
that's good.
yeah, just now.
Wow.
Like they haven't done it forever, and now they're finally doing it. Like, yeah, credit score, how to get a loan, you know, yeah, how to have a budget and live within your means and stuff like that. It's in a way, it's not good for the banks, because all the banks, they want you to get in debt. They
They
show
do.
you those interest rates and credit cards. It's so easy to get 5 credit cards, and all of a
That's
sudden,
all my credit cards as in a college. In college, like, why are they giving me? I had like 5 credit cards in college. I
yeah,
was like,
then you
go
get a,
approved, approved. If you're like enrolled in college, they'll approve you. It's like done.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then you're like their slave, because you get caught up in the new dress, and the stereo system or for the sofa, whatever, and shoes, and and you go, oh, I guess I'll just pay the minimum, but oh, so much money goes in interest you don't even realize. I just told that to my son, and I said, Marcos, one of the worst things you can do is not pay your credit card balance at the end of the month. I mean, that's 101. They just don't do the math. They don't see how much
You're paying like 5 times for those shoes or whatever. You're
yeah.
like, okay, those shoes just cost you $500.
Yeah, was it worth it? Yeah, yeah, it cost you like. So that's what we need to teach them. And my son is really good, but now he started, I don't know, he just didn't think about it. I go, oh yeah, because he has money saved up, but he didn't want to touch the savings and just not pay the full amount. I go, take money from your savings, pay the full amount, and then go back to the savings and recover that in a few months. But don't ever pay the interest rate. Like, don't ever pay the minimum. Always pay the full balance. So I hope he listened to me. We'll see. I'll find out. But that's the message we want to teach to all young people when they start getting credit cards, is to that's where they get you. It's a game.
They get you. They do.
It's
And
a
then
very
you
expensive game.
Yeah, and then now with kids with Amazon cards and every clothing store has a card. They think it's free money. I felt that way in college, even though logically you're like, I know I'm going to pay for this one day, but you're like, I'll pay for it. And then I got out of college with tremendous debt. Like it was just crazy, and that's how I'm entering the workforce. It was just like with all this debt on my back from nothing, from stuff that could have been avoided, totally avoidable. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and then like now, before you get married, now you have to check your partner's credit, because you're gonna get sucked into whatever crazy shit they did.
I've heard some nightmarish situations with that happening to people. What really quick with your mom? So did she sell the business? What happened?
She didn't even have a chance to sell it. She closed it, but she was so thankful. She needed to do something else, of course. If not, if you stay then you can get depressed. But she started going to the theater. She started dancing tango. She traveled a lot, had this freedom to travel. And so instead of putting that money in a losing business, that money was to look for other things that were rewarding for her and stuff like that.
To live your life. Yeah. And I think sometimes that's the thing too. It's like, I've talked a lot about moving into the horrible apartment, but like for me, that was like a much bigger lesson, because it was my old habit of like, oh, this is going to be better. And I was kind of getting in that cheap mentality, because I was like, oh, it's cheaper. And I don't even like that word cheaper, because it's like, if you're going for cheaper, that's what you're going to get, is cheaper. It's like, if it's less expensive, that's okay, because that's value still, but cheaper, is that what you want? But I was getting in that mentality, and it was so far away. And I was like, but it's less expensive, blah, blah. But then I was spending like $500 in gas. And then I was spending and then you don't think about the commute and how much time you're on the road and the liability there. My niece was about to do the same thing. She was like, everything she does is in this area, right? Like Southeast Denver. It's like, everybody's here. She's always over here, blah, blah, blah. She was going to move to Arvada because it was cheaper. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going to spend 5 hours in the car. You could get in a car accident. These are the things that people don't think about. You can't go from a lack mentality. It's actually going to cost you more.
Yeah.
We don't think of it that way. You're like, oh, but it's less money. No, it isn't. It actually costs more. It just looks like it's less.
Yeah, that analysis.
With your mom, it was costing her more to keep the business.
Sometimes we don't see some of the destructive behavior we have. I mean, I include myself, of course, but where is the money going? Is she buying a lot of clothes? Is she's spending a lot on booze and alcohol and stuff? It's better to stay and have a good quality of life, less commuting, safe neighborhood, nice place, but sacrifice the other stuff that's more material stuff, maybe. So
well, yeah, it's so funny. I mean, it's like, I did the same thing when I lived in California, when I was in my early 20s, you know, it's expensive, still expensive there. But so the valley, when you're far away from the beach, is cheaper. And so that's where a lot of artists move when they first move there, because you can get rent less. But I was miserable over there. And one of my a casting director was like, you got to move to the beach. Why did you move to California? Don't you want to be by the beach? And I said, well, of course, but it's so expensive, blah, blah. And she's like, first of all, you got to hang out where successful people hang out. And that's what she said to me. She said, so even if you get a studio apartment where successful people are, your mentality is going to lift up. And she was right. So I finally moved to the west side in a tiny apartment. My first one was a studio apartment, 10 blocks from the beach. But guess what? I was around successful people. My
Yeah.
whole perspective shifted. I
Yeah.
felt good, so I started making more money. It's crazy. So yeah, I mean, it's so true. Sometimes it feels like, no, I can't do that. And I see it with my students all the time. They'll be like, I can't afford that. And I'm like, yeah, but how much money did you spend on beer or cigarettes or whatever? But like, you don't see.
Yeah, why do we have this, again, this destructive behavior of like immediate gratification, right? Like, you do you really need to drink 6 beers, 10 beers, every day? Or instead of finding that internal joy, internal happiness through things that are healthier.
Yeah.
And I'm still talking about that because the other thing is, it's all in Spanish and we recorded it. And this guy is 28 and he was so mature, so mature, so wise. And he was saying that, yeah, because he's in the entertainment business, there's a lot of drugs, but he doesn't really do drugs because he has that self-worth, self-love, self-confidence, and he doesn't need to, but he sees other people get into that. And so not only is it affecting their health, but it's affecting their financial situation. So I don't know if this is like, some people might connect with this story, with this message, and they say, oh, maybe I am. Like, just calculate how much money you're spending on marijuana or alcohol. Just do the math, and then you'll see that maybe a third or something of your salary, your income is going to that, when it can go to save so you can later buy an apartment.
True. Well, one thing that I know I've spent a lot of money on is Starbucks. And God, it's true. And I remember a financial advisor came into the restaurant one time because I was bringing in Starbucks for the whole like staff, or it wasn't even Starbucks. It was a privately owned business. So I feel a little better, whatever, nothing against Starbucks, but and so they were next door to so we would buy latte, it was my turn to buy everybody lattes. And he saw me with the whole thing. And he said, how much you buy a latte? You buy a latte every day? And I was like, yeah, pretty much before I go to work. I was like 20. And he's like, if you just put that money that you're $5 a day for your latte, and he did the math or whatever, by the time you're 50 or something, he's like, you'd have like $150,000 in interest from those lattes. If you just put that in the bank every day, $5, $5. So I've also gotten the advice, and I still buy coffee. I know I'm just like, throw that money away. And, now I buy coffee and make it at home more because I realize that is a waste. That's a lot of money that I'm putting out for nothing.
Yeah. So that there's little pleasures that it's just managing. Like my son, I think he was saving like 20% of his paycheck. I go, Marcos, that's like, you could go over saving because you don't enjoy the moment, the present. And then you get obsessed with the saving and saving. So I go, Marcos, 20%, that's my opinion, right? Like, that's, you don't need to save 20%. But who knows? Let's just say, oh yeah, it's not good when you can't pay your credit card, your balance. Like, he's saving the 20%, but he's not paying the balance. I go, don't save 20%, save 10%, pay that credit card balance, because then you're giving interest to the bank and the credit card. It's your money. It's, if we would have had the cash and we go to the bank and give some it just give that cash to him and you're not going to see it again. Not to deposit, but just, oh, this is for you bank to pay for the executive, so you can have your second home or that's what you're doing.
It's so true, because it's like you pit, I mean, but we don't think of this, and I'm just now grasping it too. It's why I'm getting happier, but it's like 20%, and then he's probably paying 25% on the credit card. So it's
Yeah.
so now it's a wash. So your money that you're saving is actually canceled out by that credit card debt. But see, this could be a class, Mariano, that we could teach, because this is where I noticed especially creatives, they just like most creative. I hate it because but it's true. A lot of artists just don't get this. And they think either you're an artist or you're finance or business. You're not both, but it's like, no, you're not going to be successful if you don't know. And then they say, well, I'll just have somebody else take care of it. Well, I have a client who's, in his 20s and he's a millionaire, and his accountant took $30,000, embezzled $30,000 from him because he wasn't paying attention.
Yes.
So it's like you can have people working for you and you still have to pay attention to what is going on, because unfortunately people will take you, like if you're not, whether it's the bank or your accountant or something, you know what I mean? It's like you can't just trust everyone else to manage your stuff just because you don't like it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing. Yeah, we can talk about it, where I actually hired consultants, financial consultants, because my background was always as an employee and I didn't worry about the financial part of the business. I had certain goals I had to meet as directors, and I didn't understand balance sheets and profit and loss statements. But once I learned at the beginning, it's a little bit, difficult, but once you learn it, you really can see where if something weird happens, like money that's being embellished or something, you can detect that. That's one. But the other thing is you can have more peace of mind when you know what's happening with your cash flow. So I don't know if you ever done like a personal financial statement?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when I had to sell some assets and my business started to really downsize, and I started to get scared, depressed and stuff. But then I analyzed my financial statement and I was focusing on the half glass full instead of the half glass. No, sorry. I was focusing on the half glass empty, but I had less instead of, oh, but I have this. Because you understand and go, oh, I have this. And don't focus on all the bad stuff that's happening. You can also focus on the good stuff that's happening. And that changed that's why I started acting and starting my business. I wasn't scared. Like if I was scared, I wouldn't be investing in free thinkers of the world and putting money. Now I go, I can manage the risk. That's a big one too, manage the risk. So we'll talk about that.
I think about you a lot, Mariano, and I think that, we could really teach a class bringing exactly what we've talked about, a digital course about business and creative. Like, how can when it seems so overwhelming to look at my books, how can we make it a creative process? How can we make it an artistic process so that you're not so overwhelmed? Because I'm so impressed, and I think a lot of people would want to buy a course on, like, you were $60,000 in debt. If you had just focused on the myopic, like, I got to go get another 9-to-5 job, pay off my debt and take care of my family, more than likely you'd probably still be in debt and like struggling and not living the life of your dreams. But instead, you looked at a bigger picture. You thought bigger. And that's what I notice all the millionaires do. It's like they think bigger. Okay, wait. I can't think about the 60 grand in debt. I got to think about how can I make more to cover that and then some, and leverage. And what a success story. It's because not only did you do that, but then you got a loan, but that's not a quick fix. That money could just disappear. You know what I mean? If you're not
Yeah.
You could have just wiped out your debt and then lived for a few months and done, right? So it's like, how do you leverage that money in a practical way? Like step-by-step program of like, this is what
Yeah.
you do.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that and help people with the first step and the mindset and the risk taking. And even now, I know we're running. We'll talk about it next time. But there is um, the also the challenge and the growth, because I have people my age that they're stable financially, and then they're done. They say, I've already worked my ass off and blah blah. And now I'm reinventing and learning and meeting new people, and it's so exciting. So we'll talk about that. It's not just about money, but the money is necessary to give you that freedom and creativity focus. Because if you can't pay your bills, it just drains. It really stuff.
Well, and that's the other thing, that mindset, because I don't know any successful person, who has good finances, who also thinks money's evil. That's the other thing. It's like, you can't hate money and make money. Like,
Yeah.
you've got to understand that it's energy and that it buys you freedom.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that, because I had that conversation with my son a lot. So
Okay, good. That's good. Okay.
we'll talk, because that's a very interesting topic.
It is. Well, thank you, Mariano. I'll send you
Okay.
this recording.
Well, yes. Take care.
Okay. You
Have a good
too.
weekend.
Bye.
Bye.